Welcome to Ray-ality TV. I'm Raymond Bakari. The road to the 2024 presidential election has begun. Several candidates either have or are expected to emerge in the Republican presidential primary. One of those candidates who have announced they are running is former Cranston Mayor Steve Laffey. Mayor Laffey, how are you today?
Great, Raymond. Great to be on with Rhode Island College. I was on with Rhode Island College back in the 80s doing some of this stuff in radio in your place. But anyway, that's a whole nother story, but it's great to be back.
And it's great to have you on. And this is going to be featured in the Anchor newspaper. Also, we'll dual upload this video for the Anchor TV YouTube channel. Thank you so much for giving us your time for this. My first question is a bit of a general one. What motivated you to run for president?
Here's the deal, Raymond, and this is why I'm so glad to be on with the young people. We as Americans have to finally directly confront our problems, or you people will not have a future. I mean, I have 6 children, and they're going to be fine. But most kids in America are not. We have giant problems in this country. Let's just take one. Why haven't we directly confronted the giant $63 trillion? That's 63, folks. People should write 12 zeros next to that and stare at it. That's 3 times the amount of public debt we have, which is roughly 21 trillion. So Social Security by itself is a giant problem that we haven't even talked about since 1983 when Alan Greenspan said he fixed it, which he didn't. Because it's the only way you fix things is when assets match liabilities. So what do we have? We have Republican Democratic president over the years. They don't do anything about it. George Bush in 2005 tried for 5 or 6 days. I was actually right near Rhode Island College when I was asked about his plan. This is why I remember this. And so what did President Trump say? This is not a knock on President Trump personally or anything like that. He said he wouldn't touch it when he ran, and he said he wouldn't touch it a couple of weeks ago. That's actually the Republican policy from Speaker McCarthy and other Republicans. The Democratic policy is what? If they can get their hands on things, they'll raise taxes to 20 million bucks on everybody, 12% extra above the 100,000 limit. And so, but here's the deal. You get to be 35. If you were 35 right now, which you're obviously on, you would meet with a financial advisor one time. And you know what they do? They put a 0 next to your Social Security for retirement. They know you're not getting it. That's a standard thing in financial planning for anybody 40 and under. How can that be? And it gets at a bigger point for what you kids are doing, young people are doing, let's call it young adults. Why aren't you rioting about this in a peaceful way? Why aren't you calling your dad and mom today after you hear this and say, Dad, Mom, Grandpa, they called you the greatest generation. Why are you hosing me, to use a vernacular, let's say, of 20-year-olds, right? You need to do this. This is a giant problem. So the Times call, why else am I running? The Times call for a financial expert. They don't call for just a businessman. They certainly doesn't call for any more career politicians, right? So people might say about me, well, where have you been, Mayor Laffey? You haven't been around for like 8 or 9 years and so forth. Well, I know a lot about different topics with 6 kids. I know a lot about healthcare. I have a daughter with stage 4 neuroblastoma for 8 years. I've been living in Philadelphia to take care of her near the Children's Hospital in 2017. I watched my wife go to a hospital at the Children's Hospital here for a couple of years, and I started homeschooling other kids. So why can't we have someone who knows, who's seen millions of dollars of bills come across his desk, millions, for one daughter? When it comes to education, you're at Rhode Island College. Who would know more about education than me? I'm a public school kid, son of a tool maker, grew up next to a gas station and an ice cream shop on Shore Avenue. I went to Bowdoin College, Harvard Business School, the youngest one in my section, 22 years old at Harvard Business School. I helped run, president, COO, ran the venture capital operations of a $500 million revenue investment banking firm, publicly traded. I saw it being sold for $700+ million. I'm a financial expert. A team of us, but I was the mayor who turned around the near bankruptcy situation in Cranston, Rhode Island, that had the lowest bond rating in America. I taught at the University of Rhode Island while I was the mayor. So I taught the top finance course at the University of Rhode Island for over 3 years. I've educated my children in Montessori school, Catholic schools at LaSalle, public schools at Cranston, and I personally homeschooled the last 3. When my daughter, who was 18, my oldest daughter, had started with cancer. What else is there to say? Do people understand education? I understand education. I know it needs to be done. So I have these unusual attributes that other people don't have, that we need. We actually need these things now, because here's the real problem for you people to think about. America, once it crossed $21 trillion in borrowing. Now you can look at the debt clock and see 30 some odd trillion, but it's 21 trillion or so that we actually borrow from the public. Well, the normal borrowing rate over the last 35 years of America is about 6%. So let's be real rough with the numbers. 20 trillion, 6%, 1.2 trillion in interest costs. We were borrowing because the Fed kept everything so low. We were borrowing at near zero for a long time. That's not happening anymore. So now we're in the rock and the hard place. Fed can't get rates back to normal, not happening, can't really repress them, and the financial crisis is now happening. And I'm ahead of the game, don't get me wrong. It's now happening. I'm not saying it's happening in a couple of years. It's starting to happen now, because that's the real problem. We need a financial expert who knows how to hire people, put them in the right place, not politicians. Just because you've been a governor and you're a lawyer, that's wonderful. If we need some lawyers, we'll go get some lawyers. But we need people who are financial experts so we can explain this to the American people. I could go on, but that's really why I'm here. My frustrations continue to grow. I'm extremely happy. Beautiful wife, 6 beautiful kids. They all love me. I love them. They do well. I teach them. But someone has to do more. And that's what I'm called to do now.
Before we dive into some of the specifics of those issues that you mentioned that are currently facing our country, like the national debt, the future of Social Security, the current state of our educational outcomes, I want to just take a step back and look at the primary that you are going to be running in, because it's set to be a very competitive one. Currently, former President Donald Trump has announced he's running. Former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley is expected to jump in, and several others are likely to follow. Going up against some of the top names in your party, how likely do you see yourself clinching the nomination?
I don't know how likely it is, but I will tell you this. 1975, I was told a story by a grizzly old reporter who said he was in 1975, he's in Vermont, bunch of Democrats in a debate. After the debate, he says to himself, I'm a young reporter. I can't go see so-and-so and so. There's people mobbing these people. I'll just go talk to the guy who can't win, that no one's even talking to. Not a single reporter is talking to. November of 75. So he did interview Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter was the right man for the time after Watergate. They wanted a clean individual who hadn't been in trouble, who, so forth. And that's how it happened. So how did Donald Trump come from? When Donald Trump announced in 2015, I correctly said he would win. And I can tell you why. He was the first person to actually even attempt to talk about China and what needed to be done. And in those swing states, you can play the tapes of me saying this. It's on Facebook. It's at Steve Laffey. It's on my YouTube channel. There are people in Western Virginia, Western Pennsylvania, in West Virginia, and Ohio, places that, they were living the American dream, and they were making 85 grand, and their kids were going to go to a state school. But when those jobs left, starting in 2000, when China went into the World Trade Organization, these people making 60 grand. They're working 2 jobs. Their wife's working, and the kids doing some drugs. And so when they heard China, that's how we won. Now, I also correctly said that President Trump wouldn't really do anything about it. He doesn't have an ideology. He's a wonderful marketing guy. He did a great job with the judges and some other things, but he didn't follow through on communist China. If you look at my record, I am the only person who's possibly going to run who was correct in 2005 when I told Pat Toomey, U.S. Senator in the future, Pat Toomey, who ran the Club for Growth, and it's in their documents that they endorsed me. No trading with China. I'm way ahead of the issue. Where's Nikki Haley on that? They're trying to catch up, but they won't say what I said in 2005. And I said there is no evidence that a dictatorship, that a communist country would ever become a republic, a democracy, just by trading with them. All we're going to do is enrich corporations, large corporations who lobby for China, and we're going to end up in a situation where they use the cash that they get from us to build up the military. What happened? Well, a couple of weeks ago, Mario Rubio, by the way, probably a great guy. But he's wrong. Go look at where he says a couple of weeks ago about some action by China, which happens every day, whether they're weather balloons, they're not weather balloons. Every day something happens with China, right? And the non sequitur is that someone like Marco Rubio says, yeah, that's a warning shot across our bow. That was 2000. The warning shot across our bow was in 2000. So is it important to be right on the issues with the internet, with all the things you can get attention for, and the fact that I'm going to live in New Hampshire? I can catch up. That's how it happens. So whether it happens or not, I make no bones about it. No one thought I'd be the mayor of Cranston. I was down. Can I tell you one story I never really have told publicly? You want to?
Sure, go for it.
So we do this poll, 500 people in Cranston. I haven't lived there in 20 years. I was telling Catherine Gregg this. It's not in the article in the Providence Journal, but it's a true story. So 2 people knew who I was. 2. This is like May, June. Now, it's not the world. It's not America. It's just, but who would have a chance to win if only 2 people knew who they were out of 500 people? One really liked me, and one somewhat liked me. I don't know who they were. And so people would say, Steve, Mr. Laffey, what do the polls look like? And I'd be like, oh, we have very low negatives. That's the only thing I could think of without bald-faced lying. Nobody knew who I was. And I'd been doing it for a while. So these things can change. I'm going to go get into New Hampshire. I'm going to get into a debate, and that'll change the whole thing. Because the other people don't have answers. The question will be not so much about me. Questions about you. Questions about young people. Do you want to fix this? Do you want to have a future? Do you want to grow up and not get Social Security? Do you want healthcare spending at 18% of gross domestic product to be choking out all the other spending by at least $1 trillion in this country? Healthcare spending as a percentage of GDP in 1960, when Kennedy was elected, was 5% of our gross domestic product. Today it's 18%. That's going to change. It's going to have to be 12. And 6% of our GDP, take 20 trillion, it's really 23 trillion, but you're talking over $1 trillion. That's what we have to do. So the question of where I am or ask anybody. By the way, I would think, this is my own personal opinion, anybody who worked for Donald Trump has a really giant problem, Raymond. What do they say? They said nothing. What do they say? They either agree with it, or the question to them that you're going to get them on, people like you, is going to be like, why didn't you say you disagreed with the president on X, Y, Z? Very difficult. John Bolton might be able to get away with it. He left early enough and wrote a book. So I just think that's really a non-starter. And remember this other thing. I will tell you one last thing. Go ask Scott Walker, the governor of Wisconsin, the good governor of Wisconsin, and go ask Jeb Bush, the really popular governor of Florida, who were both leading in the polls by lots when they announced. So it's sort of I don't mean to make fun of it. It's sort of a nonsensical question. I mean, I am who I am. We got a lot of time. Let's go.
One of the things that you will need is a big team behind you that can effectively get your message out to the voters in those early states like Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, Nevada, the Super Tuesday states. What does your current base of operations look like? Is there anybody on the team yet?
Oh, yeah, there are people on the team, but it's different. It's not 1980. When I need people, I'll get people. And as it grows, I'll get more. I don't need anybody in Iowa today.
So you're going for a grassroots style at the moment?
Well, of course, if you're not, there's something wrong with you. You're wasting money. People, just so everybody understands, almost nobody pays attention to elections till 2 weeks in front. So whatever people want to say, whatever people want to publish, almost nobody pays attention to an election until about 2 weeks in front of the election. You may be doing this because you do. I do because that's who I am. The people over there, ask them about 2 weeks in front of the election. So the key is to be set up for that and be in it when people are really paying attention. A lot of money in politics is totally wasted. And I don't know if you heard it, but there's something called the internet and Zoom calls. and they're pretty cheap. Anyway, keep going.
One thing this primary will showcase is the current factionalization within the party, which you sort of touched upon in one of your earlier answers. You have the moderate wing of the party, where you have your Nikki Haley's that are considered more moderate than former President Trump, and that wing of the party is growing with your Matt Gaetz's, your Marjorie Taylor Greene's, your Matt Rosendale's. They're all going to duke it out in this primary. Not those names specifically, but the ideas are going to duke it out in the primary. Where do you see yourself on that spectrum? Are you more conservative, a principled conservative, moderate?
I'm a populist conservative, I guess, if you had to put the thing, but see that again, that's the wrong question. Again, I don't mean to say it that way to you. You're doing a great job. Just picture a 5-lane highway, and there's a Laffey lane of directly confronting the problems. And that's, I just told you about Social Security. And at stevelaffey.com, there's a complete solution there. It's not my solution, by the way. Larry Kotlikoff, senior economic professor at BU, Boston University, the world-renowned man in Social Security, books, websites. He writes in Forbes, he writes in Fortune. He's a personal friend of mine. He's also in my movie Fixing America. It's his plan. So you don't have to invent plans. You know, who's going to say they agree with Steve Laffey on that? Nobody. They're all going to say nothing. It's going to be chirping. Who's going to talk about corruption on my website? All U.S. senators in this United States, great country, all of them voted for the PPP program. Is that conservative? Is that liberal? Is that hard? Is it left? It's a joke. It's the biggest boondoggle that anybody ever came up with. Every U.S. senator voted for it, and President Trump signed off on it. There's 70,000 cases of fraud. Did Nikki Haley say it was bad? I said it was a terrible decision at the day they were doing it. So it's issues. It's not, there's no longer time for this kind of nonsense of who's more conservative. The country is broke, totally broke. And you young people are going to get nothing. And this is the only time we've left you with nothing. When I was a kid, my parents were leaving me with more, with a better opportunity to go to a better college, to get a better job. That no longer exists. That's why I'm running. So this whole, I think you have to stop asking these normal questions. We're not in a normal time.
Well, time to get into the meat and potatoes of it. It sounds like, speaking of the country being broke, our national debt is currently at 31.5 trillion. How would you bring it down as president?
Well, I just told you, one is healthcare. Second, we have to have a different tax system. The 999 plan by Herman Cain back in 2011, who became a friend of mine, was widely popular. We all knew it provided fairness. We all knew it was efficient. And we all knew it was simple. We didn't need the IRS. Why do you think, watch the debate in 2011, why do you think Rick Santorum and Mitt Romney attacked them so viciously? Because they were the establishment people. They get their money from wealthy people who get around the tax code. So that's where we have to go to. These are the kind of things we have to do. For example, healthcare in this country, 40% of cancers are caused by obesity. We spend 40% more per person than Switzerland. By the way, there are simple ways to kind of get this under control. Look at what happened in Switzerland like 20 years ago. They put on what they call a debt brake. Go look it up. They can't spend more than the economy grows, and their GDP per capita roughly around that time was like 20%. We're at 100. Where are they today? They're at 24. So there's a lot of things to be cut. And by the way, who could run that's ever cut anything? Only me. I mean, look at my record in Cranston. Who could run that ever got the bond rating up as a mayor or a governor? Only me. So there's a lot to get to in our budget, but it can't be that. I mean, Paul Ryan was in 2012, a famous interview with Britt Hume. He's a vice presidential candidate, and Britt Hume is says he wants to balance the budget. And he says his budget balances in 2030. And Britt Hume knows the interview's over, and I know the election's over for Mitt Romney, because there's a joke. So there's a lot of things to go to. They're on my website. I mean, I have 3-minute videos how to do all this stuff. Nobody else.
Any specific areas you want to mention while I have you on that you would support cutting?
Name a line item. I mean, we can get to every line item in that budget and take something out. That's for sure. But see, here's the thing. The big numbers are what? Go to the budget, look it up.
One of them is the military budgets.
The military budget.
Yep.
The military budget has to be totally reworked. But it's not about spending less. It's about things like, why aren't we building 3 new nuclear submarines a year? Why aren't we keeping where we need to be? Why have we run out of munitions so that if China attacked Taiwan, according to the recent report I was just reading, we have 2 weeks of munitions left. I mean, missiles, things to get going with. That can't be. So it's not that you take military off the table. It's just that the giant conglomerates involved in that waste so much money that has to be, I mean, you can go through all these things And there's, you know, by the way, at fixingamericamovie.com, I balance the budget and take $1 trillion out of the budget in 8 minutes. So who else has a video like that? So foreign aid, I mean, we do need to help, in my opinion, we do need to be helping Ukraine right now. A lot of this foreign aid just goes to zero. You know, you think about President Trump trying to cajole correctly NATO to spend more money so we wouldn't have to be involved in NATO because we spend the most. And it was a little bit successful. Good for him, you know, more than the previous presidents who ignored the problem. But think about how much money, they're in a wartime situation. How much money do we spend in the USA in the last real wars? Like 10% of GDP. I know we're at 3.5 now, but we're not going to be able to get to 10. It's their problem. It's by the way, Taiwan's going to have to take their spending up to 10% of GDP. So a lot of other people have to do things. But you know, our healthcare system is maybe the biggest place we can get $1 trillion out of just by getting people healthier with better care. So there's a lot of places to go.
And
but to say we're not going to do anything about things, that's the opposite of what I'm saying.
And while we are still on the economic situation of the United States and the budget, you mentioned Social Security throughout the first few answers, and
Yep.
I feel like we should talk about that a little more in depth. It's a hot button issue right now. The Democrats are consistently saying the Republicans want to privatize it or cut it. Then Speaker McCarthy consistently responds with, "That's not true." You referenced a plan earlier in one of your answers. You call it on your website the Purple Fix. Can you talk a little bit about the main parts of that plan?
Yeah, I could read them to you, but everybody should go to stevelaffey.com and just read it, because I don't put up 3 simple words and say everything's huge. That's not what I do. If you have people who can do that, they think everybody else around them is dumb and they just say simple words and they say nothing. So people already in Social Security are sort of grandfathered in. So now we can stop the conversation about cuts, right? Or your mom or your grandma, right? So that doesn't enter the equation. You freeze the current number for everybody else. So say you're 40, you paid in for 20 years. You're in the old system for whatever it says you're going to get. And now we get you to the new system. Under 60, the new plan, in addition to where you're frozen above, you pay about 10% into the account, and it gets invested in a worldwide basket of stocks, bonds, you know, real estate, and so forth. If you end up getting divorced, half goes to your wife, half goes to you. It's really your account. You die, your heirs get it. You get to be like 61 years old, and we stop buying either annuities or tips or whatever it might be till you're 70. Whoever makes it to 70, you get money. Now, under any scenario, you, Raymond, will get a lot more. I did a paper on this when I was at your age at Bowdoin College, and how what a disastrous thing Social Security was then. So this is now, by the way, I want to be very clear about this. One, if someone has a better plan to take $63 trillion, triple the national debt, to zero, I'm all in. I haven't heard it. 2, some people will probably get less. Somebody over 40 and under 60, if the stock market and real estate don't do as well, remember they've been zeroed out, but they're going to get what they get as they turn 43. We go to a new program. They only have 17 years. And we could have a 17-year period where things underperform. True. Here's my question for you. What's the other plan? Remember this, and young people remember this. When someone says the word fix, they mean like you had a new carburetor for your car and you gave someone money. If you just wanted people to keep talking, like you just said, Democrats say blah, 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 totally untrue. Nobody in the Republican Party wants to end Social Security. I don't know anybody. There could be, I don't know anybody, right? The Republican plan is do nothing and grit your teeth and hope it doesn't implode, and don't be in office when we cut the checks for all the retirees by a third or a half. That's their plan. Democrat plan, I really don't know what to say. They've been in power certain times. They've done nothing. What do you think it is? It seems to be they will raise taxes on Social Security at a marginal rate that we've never seen in this country. I don't know. Effectively, both parties have no plan, and you're speaking to the only person who does.
Another top issue you had raised earlier on in one of your answers as well, I want to talk about. It's also another big topic that's going to be prevalent in this election is education.
Yeah.
It seems like a growing majority of the GOP base supports some form of school choice. Do you?
Some form. Listen, I'm the only person who's actually educated kids in all these different ways. I became radicalized against the public school system in 2007. Let me tell you why. My kids were in public school. These are Sam and Sarah. Pete was in private. He was with me. He's my first wife, so he was at LaSalle when I had custody of him. He's over in private school, public school in California with his mom. And my wife wanted to go to Ireland for a couple of months. I wasn't in office. My book, Primary Mistake, through Penguin Books, was coming out in September. So I grabbed some books and started talking to the kids about what we need to teach them. And I was ashamed of myself. My kids knew nothing. I never sent them back. But here's the big question, or the big answer. I'm the only person who actually, as I told you, has the widespread range of experience in education. For my own, I have the most kids. I've taught university level. The public schools cannot be fixed. So I'm not just for charter schools. I think many people listening to this broadcast or nationwide, or when I do some stuff, will still think that they just saw a rerun of Little House on the Prairie and think that's how schools are. Or they missed the last 10 years of PTA meetings, but they must still be happening. So the public schools have to be ended over a long period of time. Why doesn't the Department of Education have a great Algebra 1 teacher on their website so everybody could learn it for free? Free. I could teach it as president. Algebra 1. I mean, I don't want to teach calc anymore. I took 3 semesters in college, but why don't we do that? So here's another question for you, anybody who comes on. If Denver, I'm sure Providence, Rhode Island, the same, it's $21,000 a student, and Steve Laffey, using Veritas and their homeschooling, is at 4,000. What's LaSalle Academy at Providence? I don't know. It's got to be less than 21,000. What's charter schools? And what's free? And what would that do to property taxes, especially where you're sitting in Rhode Island? Might cut them by a third. Why won't people, why is that not an issue? So what do we have instead? Republican, just go to Republican governors, forget Democrat. They just want to give the wokeness to people and whatever, right? But let's go to Republican governors. What do you see in the paper? Republican governors want less wokeness, whatever that term means, but they'll give more money to public schools as if they're placating people, or it could be fixed. Have you ever looked up the last 20 years of SAT scores? Have anybody looked at what they look like and what people know? More money, scores down. As a businessman, why would we do this? So again, back to what conservative, who's in what lane, it's the Laffey lane. No one's going to say this to you.
So just to clarify, you would want to outright get rid of public schools and have options like the charters and homeschooling in lieu of it?
Yeah, outright, not in one day, over a 10-year
period. Over time, yeah.
Yeah, over a 10-year period, we've got to pull more kids out until we get them all out. I mean, I don't know who would disagree with this. Which parent sitting in Providence, Rhode Island is like, my kids are doing okay at Mount Pleasant? Ooh. Central High School, that was a special school back when I was a kid. I kind of grew up going to the Providence Y, it doesn't exist, and walking near Central a lot, which I wasn't supposed to as a 9-year-old, but even back then. But who's saying great job? Anybody? Anybody pleased? You couldn't find a parent in Providence, Rhode Island saying, oh, Mayor Laffey, if they still call me that, which they do when I'm home. Oh, you're wrong. My kids just got this great classroom. They got these. Ask yourself this question. Do a little research. How much money do you think Providence, Rhode Island school system spent on new textbooks last year? Why don't you go grab the textbooks and see when the copyright date was? I did it when I was Mayor Cranston. They had math books that were 20 years old. Rips. I mean, it's disgusting. That can't happen anymore. This has to stop. Because young people aren't learning, and that's the beginning of the cycle of death for any country. How does a democracy thrive with a very strong middle class? How do you get to a good, strong middle class? Good schooling of young people. Without that, we got nothing.
A few criticisms I do hear with the ideas of having more charters in lieu of public schools. Sometimes this is typically from the left, they get very angry that the charter schools aren't unionized when it comes to the teachers, that they can select which students they want over other ones. How would you respond to those kinds of pushback?
I don't understand. I think that people say that just can't do math. Can I do a simple math equation? $21,000 a student. I take the best students from your school at my charter school. I take them. I do it for $7,000. There's 1,000 students. I take 100. Who's hurt again? Don't you have $23,000 per student if you want to spend the same money? What am I missing about that equation? How does it even make any sense? What if I take another 100? What if I leave you with the worst 100 kids that are either at the we used to call it Sakanasa, I don't know what they call it, but who are either like half in and out of the bad boy school, another phrase we used to use in Cranston, because it was in Cranston, the kids' prison. We're leaving you with kids who IQs of 85. We're leaving you with the kids who have real special problems. Now you spend $40,000 a kid to help them. Is there another side of what I'm saying? Because I've never heard anybody retort after I finished giving that speech. And it's simple math. But they say things that get reported that are dumb, that don't make sense. And that's why they don't let me on the stage sometimes back when I was mayor, because when I'm saying I could just draw this out mathematically for you and be like, well, wait a second, 100 kids left. The other kids are at 7. We were spending 21, 14 times 90, 900. I mean, how much money do you want? You'd have lower property tax and more money for every problem kid that was left. There's no answer to what I'm saying. Go ahead.
Well, that is also one part of it. Another part I also want to talk about while we're still on education, because you've been very vocal on your website about how Common Core has failed, and that's a popular belief. A lot of people aren't as in favor of Common Core. And there's a large number of people that would rather be taught skills like how to do their taxes or know what a balloon payment is, as opposed to being taught the quadratic formula, which they'll never likely use outside of school.
Oh, that's not my point. My point is how you teach the quadratic formula. Everybody should take math.
Right.
Everybody needs to know math. That wasn't my point. Common Core failed because of the way it taught.
Right. My question is, though, in general, when it comes to curriculum, what kind of changes would you, whether it's how it's taught or what is taught?
Let parents decide. They can get their kid to that charter school. They can get a check for homeschooling themselves. They can go to LaSalle if they decide to, with a check to go there. That's a third of what it cost in Providence. What do I care? Why don't we just let the parents decide? My question back to anybody who says that is, how could my idea be worse? How could it possibly? Have you ever been to the inner city of Memphis, Tennessee, and go to the Caldwell School? Have you ever seen this? I don't think if you've seen what I've seen when I was in Memphis, that's over 20 years ago. I'm haunted by the 5th graders who are totally lost. And I'm trying to teach them about capitalism and making a pen, make it yourself, or get a production line. Between 1st and 5th grade in these inner cities, they're lost. They're gone in public schools. There's nobody who argues with me about this. We can't have this anymore. And that's why I'm running. No one knows more about this than me. Nobody running. I mean, somebody in the world does, a lot of people, but nobody's going to run knows more about this than me, who's personally homeschooled their children. By the way, do you want to know the results of me homeschooling 3 kids? The youngest admittee at Colorado State University is a 12-year-old named Stephen Patrick Laffey Jr. He's a 14-year-old college sophomore, a GPA of 3.95. My next one, Jessica, she's actually supposed to be a high school junior, homeschooled by me, sophomore at Colorado State University, 4.0 GPA. Do I need to go on?
No, those are amazing results. How likely do you think it would be to get Congress on board with these proposals?
It's not Congress on board. It's the people of America. This is the mistake you make. You know, people, you're going to talk to someone like David Cicilline who runs and says, I voted this way. Did he change 10 other votes? He never says that. My job, and what I've been successful at in the private sector and on the city council of Cranston, Rhode Island, is to change votes, to change hearts, to change minds, and make people vote my way. This isn't really a congressional thing, by the way. It's a presidential thing. It's like you're too young to remember, and I'm too young too, thankfully, but John F. Kennedy started the Presidential Physical Fitness Award. I'm not sure if they do it anymore. It was a huge thing in the 70s when I was growing up. You got a big badge, you got 50%, you had to run 600 yards, do pull-ups. Everybody was into it. You don't see this anymore. You know what you see? When you see kids, you see this. They're walking around like this. What is this? By the way, my kids don't do that. They don't get this kind of stuff. They don't get to watch the modern TV when they're growing up with me. They watch Hogan's Heroes. You don't even know what that is, probably. They watch things that have come in the 60s. It's just the stuff on TV today is dumb. So we don't do it. So my results are in. I've got 6 kids. They all do pretty well. One graduated college at 20, got a JD MBA, is the assistant district attorney out in Alaska. One went to Columbia University, double major economics, computer science, big job out in LA. My daughter, with 8 years of cancer, crawls her way through one class at a time to finish college and is at BU and graduate school with cancer. So if we want someone to be president who knows about this stuff, we want me. If we want people who've been in office a long time, you really don't want me. That's the choice.
Moving on from education, I have a few topics I want to get through quickly, so I'm going to go with a lightning round style.
And I'm going to run out of time, so I'm sorry. It's probably my fault.
No worries. Let's just go with a quick lightning round. And are you
Okay.
pro-life or pro-choice?
Pro-life.
Would you support or oppose a federal ban on assault-style weapons like the AR-15?
No.
Adding more justices to the Supreme Court, support or oppose?
Never.
For or against statehood for DC and Puerto Rico?
Never.
Okay, 2 quick Gen Z questions because you did talk about young voters, which I do appreciate as a member of Gen Z myself. The GOP has had a difficult time appealing to younger voters, especially Generation Z and folks like myself.
Yes.
Well, in my generation, I don't want to speak on behalf. What do you believe could be preventing your party from successfully appealing to them?
The number one thing is just what I talked about. The young people look at Republicans and say, you totally hosed me. And the public school system hasn't helped. Usually when I'm with young people, I'll give you an example. I lectured over at Colorado State University to the top business class last semester, and about 90 kids. And at the end, about 12 people lined up, and one young lady came up to me and said, I went to your website and I really didn't like you. I really didn't like you. But I like you. That's what tends to happen when I get in front of young people. Hopefully I can get in front of your school at some point and talk to all of you about this. About what you do at school, how you prepare. At URI, used to do resume workshops just for kids. 300 would show up at a time. I just knew they were terrible. I just saw some resumes. I went to Ed Mazie, the dean of the business school, and Bob Carruthers, who was the president, and said, I'll just do this. Just get them in a room. You can't have resumes like this. So I've helped these young people, I like to think, and I enjoy doing it. But yeah, it's been a real problem. It's been a real problem. So it has to change, and maybe someone can change it. My kids are all voting for me, so I'm okay with them if they're old enough.
So if elected president, how do you plan to best represent the interests of Gen Z?
By making sure they have a future. That's all. Listen, if you expect more than having a good shot at the future, I'm not your guy. If you want some guaranteed blah, 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 I'm not your guy. But if you want the opportunity to live in a country that has a strong dollar, that has a future for you, that has a currency, that has a tax system that you actually understand and you think it's fair and easy, you don't have to spend any time on it. If you want Social Security when you get older and get like maybe a check 5 times bigger than what I'm going to get, if I start taking it next year, you want me. If you want the most well-known person, you got people. If you want people been in office for a long time, you got them. If you want something different, I'm your man.
I always like to ask this for the last question as a non-political topic to end things on a bit of an icebreaker. It's been some time since you've been in Rhode Island, but you were mayor of Cranston. You ran for Senate in 2006. What do you think Rhode Island is best known for?
Unfortunately, I would say corruption. When you see I hate to say this to people, when you see someone in Colorado and you say you're from Rhode Island, they go, oh, wow. Many people say it's just, wow, it's a pretty corrupt place, huh? I like to think it's known for Italian food. And I actually will tell you this, many things I love, don't get me wrong, I love Rhode Island and I love being in Rhode Island. It breaks my heart to be there and see the state just crumbling still, the highway. I made a movie when we drove into Rhode Island from Connecticut. We drove all the country from Fort Collins, Colorado. All of a sudden, people like, what's wrong with these roads? They weren't from Rhode Island. They come from other parts. The whole infrastructure's crumbled. Look at the schools. You guys should go and do videos of what the schools look like, just what they look like. Kids can't learn in these schools. Listen, Rhode Island has the greatest beaches, has the, Dell's Lemonade. My favorite ice cream is peppermint mint. at the Newport Creamery, those plastic things, you know.
Yep.
I even thought of buying it. It went broke when I came home, and I didn't buy it, but because I was going to run for mayor, but I said I should buy Newport Creamery. I love Newport Creamery. I would eat there every single day. In fact, I think as mayor, I generally ate there, and the relish in the Newport Creamery is the greatest thing of all time. So I go on all day about great things in Rhode Island, you know, and I love it. The beaches, of course, and the people. Listen, the thing about Rhode Island, it's very different. People are very colorful. It's a good way to use it, right? They're just, you know, radio shows I would host, people scream at me, they love me. It's not indifference, and that's fun, and I miss it greatly. Don't get me wrong, I miss it greatly.
Absolutely, it's a wonderful place to be. I think that's a great place to end things off. Mayor
Yeah.
Laffey, I want to thank you so much for giving me your time for this. I really
Yeah,
appreciate
Raymond, I'll
it.
do it again. Raymond, keep going. You may have to help me out. You seem like a good guy. Anyway, God bless, and find some people to help me out because I'm headed to New Hampshire. We'll have to do this at UNH soon.
Thank you for your time.
God
Mayor
bless
Laffey.
you. All right,
Everyone.
bye bye.
And thank you for watching this episode of Ray-ality TV, or if you're tuning in on Anchor TV, the YouTube channel, or anchorweb.org, the website for the Anchor newspaper. If you want to see future episodes, whether it's posted on the Anchor TV YouTube channel, the Anchor Web website, or the Ray-ality TV YouTube channel, please click the respective subscribe buttons down below and the post notification bell icons to the right of it, and sign up for our email list on anchorweb.org. That's Anchor, ANCHORWEB.org. I'm Raymond Bakari, and I'll see you next time.